Part B asks us to write an equation that shows how to determine the t-shirt cost for any number of customers. In other words, it wants us to explain or show in math the relationship between N and C. How do you go from N to C? That's what you want to ask yourself if you're having a hard time writing your equation. How do you go from the number on the left to the number on the right? What do you do to it? What do you do to N to get to C? And it has to work every time. So plus 2 does not work. It only works in one situation. So it is not N plus 2. What do you do to N to get to C? Hopefully you said multiply by 3. N times 3 equals C. And look, we can show that this works by plugging in some values here. We could write 2 times 3 equals 6. And look, there's our 2, and we multiplied it by 3, and we got out our 6. So we plug in our N, and we get out our C. You always want to check to make sure that your equation works. I'm not going to write this, but if you write this on your test, that's perfectly acceptable as your equation. I'm going to write C equals 3N. This is what we call standard form starting in 7th grade. And your 7th grade teacher will insist that you write it this way. This is just the simplest way to possibly write the equation. But for the purpose of the test, this is okay. But this is like really, really good. This is what your 7th grade teacher will look like if you start writing equations like this right away in 7th grade. I also want to note that the unit rate that we previously identified as 3, well, where do we see that in our equation? It becomes the coefficient of N, becomes the number that's being multiplied on N. And you will see this every single time throughout this video, throughout 6th grade and 7th grade and 8th grade and possibly even 9th grade, depending on what math you take. Okay, part C says, how many shirts did the company buy if their total cost is $30? Explain how you found your answer. In other words, they're telling us the C, and they're asking us what the N is. So they're telling us that the C is 30, and they want to know what this number is. Well, how do we go? We know how to go from N to C. We multiply by 3. So how do we go from C to N? Hopefully you said divide by 3, which would be correct. And yes, the answer is 10. I'm going to show you one more way of doing this, and that is that we could take this 30 here. I'm not going to use that color because that was the color that we used for our unit rate. I will use this other color, this 30, and we could substitute it in for C. So instead of writing, I'm having some trouble here. Instead of writing C equals 3N, we're going to write 30 equals 3N. And this helps us see that 30 times some number equals 3 times some number equals 30. We can divide by 3 on both sides. And we're left with 10 equals, well, 3 over 3 is 1, so that's just N. Or N equals 10, and you should probably say shirts. If you solve this problem using the table method, just indicate to your teacher that you solved it that way. Let's go on to the next problem.